Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Sir Hunt on X on this 15th of October, the calendar year 2025. Here's hoping everyone had themselves a wonderful day today. Lots to get to here tonight, including two wild circumstances historically in the ring, including one that took place over a century ago, which still may have everyone who likes to talk about exhibitions. Boy, I got one that took place over a century ago, and boy, that thing got crazy in a hurry. That I'll touch on at the end of the show, including the pick segments and including everyone still crying like a bunch of overgrown babies over referees. I'll touch on that as well. Now we'll get right down to it. Of course, this is week 7, so I will give you my week 7 picks. The only one I will not pick is the game tomorrow night, which is Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. I will be live at the show with my show over there at Paycor Stadium. I will make my pick live at the stadium as the game gets closer to kickoff. I will reserve that for tomorrow night live from the banks of the Ohio River in Cincinnati, Ohio. Always like taking my show on the road a little bit. Going to be doing that more over the next several months. Now I'm going to fast forward to the Sunday game in London. It is the Rams and the Jaguars. Jaguars look flatter than a flat tire against the Seahawks. Going against the Rams defense, especially a guy like Byron Young, who's just absolutely just laying the lumber onto quarterbacks right now. You talk about guys like him, Matt Fisk, and Jared Verse. That defense is stout. And of course, you have the Rams offense going against the Jacksonville defense. Jacksonville defense, very optimistic, as we saw 2 weeks ago against Kansas City with a pick 6 by Devin Lloyd, which turned the entire momentum into their favor. But of course, they laid an egg flat against Seattle. Of course, likely no Puka Nacua for the LA Rams. That's going to be a bit of a detriment. And of course, Jacksonville, they play better in London than they do in Jacksonville. So for that day coming up Sunday morning, I'll give the slim nod to the Jacksonville Jaguars, albeit not by much. Things will be a competitive game. Not having Puka Nacua might be a detriment to the LA Rams offense, because you have to rely on Kyren Williams and Devontae Adams to really get going. So give me Jacksonville in the game at London. Now to the rest of the early slate games, the 1 o'clock slate. It is Philadelphia and Minnesota. Philadelphia hasn't played great all year long. I mean, it's no brainer. They have not played great. Even the 4 wins, they haven't played great. They're just doing just enough to win games. Going against a Minnesota team, which I don't know who the heck their quarterback is. Is it McCarthy or Wentz? I guess they're still going to stick to Wentz. And the defense is, pretty stout under defensive coordinator Brian Flores. We saw how they just pounded down Cleveland to salvage a split on their European tour the previous 2 games. I'm going to take a slim nod up for Philly, albeit not by much. There's still issues with the Philly offense, as you saw the Thursday night against the Giants, where they got nothing going. I mean, the only thing they got going was 4 straight tush pushes, and we know what that draws when it comes to the NFL fan base. So if you're resorting to that to just get a touchdown, what does it really say about your offense at the end of the day? But you're playing against a Minnesota offense with Carson Wentz as your quarterback, and we know how Carson Wentz is. I mean, he got the game-winning drive against the Cleveland Browns, but Cleveland basically just mailed it in, on that game-winning drive, as we all know. So give me Philadelphia on the road, albeit this one I'm taking on them on a coin flip. The Patriots and the Titans, nothing new to see here. Titans, of course, is firing Brown and Callahan. Patriots are rolling. They keep the momentum going. Drake May is ascending to a top 10 to top 15 quarterback in the NFL. Give me the Patriots, and this one I think won't be close. And if they keep going the way they should and focus the way they do under Mike Vrabel, they'll handle business. And I think Mike Vrabel wants to win this game in Tennessee after how he was unjustly fired a couple years ago. Panthers at the Jets, the Tank Bowl, taking for the top picks. But Carolina has more on their side than the Jets. Carolina, I think, wins this one. It's going to be an embarrassing game to watch. I pity for the fans of Carolina and New York having to watch this, because it's going to be a pity of a game to watch. Raiders and the Chiefs. We know the story of this one, the return of Rashid Rice, which has everybody, over the peanuts all over the place for obvious reasons. It doesn't matter. The guy's back on the field. He served a suspension. He did whatever, served it. He's back. The Chiefs are rolling. Add him to the mix against a Raiders team who's just brought nothing to the table so far this season. Expect a wipeout for the Chiefs. I expect them to go scorched earth from now to the end of the season. Don't be surprised. We're talking about them having a game in San Francisco in February. I think we know what that game is. And the Chiefs more likely will be there. It starts Sunday. They handle the Raiders. And I think this game could be over by halftime at this rate. The Saints and the Bears. Saints, of course, one of the tanks for the first-round pick. Chicago, looking a little better as of late. They win this one at home. Give me Ben Johnson's squad, Chicago Bears. And this one I don't think will be close either because the Saints are offering nothing at the moment. So that takes care of your early slate games. Now to the late slate games. Green Bay at Arizona. A lot's been read about Green Bay, about how they play up and then down. We saw what happened to them at Cleveland, how they tied with Dallas, and how they didn't, at least perception-wise, didn't necessarily close out against Cincinnati. But they're going to face an Arizona team who's a juggernaut of a comedy, especially when we talk about how they lost to Tennessee a few weeks back. And I think Green Bay this time rides the ship. Jordan Love is going to play much better. I mean, he played solidly, but not great when they beat the Bengals. I expect them to just keep winning and moving on. They're going to win this one at Arizona. I think this one's going to be rather convincing. The Colts and the Chargers. The Colts are 5-1. I mean, you got to give them. I mean, you give them that. I mean, Lou Anarumo's cooking on that defensive side over there with the roster they have, and the offense is doing more than enough. Jonathan Taylor looks like he's healthy and he's rolling, and when he's healthy, he's as good as any running back in the NFL. And they're going to be tested here against the Chargers team with Justin Herbert. Granted, that offensive line is doing a makeshift with all the injuries they have. We're about to find out how good the Colts are and how good they can be. And if they can pull this one off against the Chargers, I think they may. We might start to have some different discussions about them. But it's going to come down to how they handle playing against a quarterback with a legit offense like what they're about to face coming up Sunday in L.A. I'm taking the Chargers on this one, albeit by a pinch, because I'm not fully trustworthy of Justin Herbert. I'm also not fully trustworthy of the Chargers and that offense, especially now we're talking about losing, of course, already lost Rashawn Slater. Now Joe Alt's going to be out for a while. He lost Najee Harris for the season, and Omarion Hampton's going to be out for a few more games. So, but I think they're going to find a way to muck it up and get the home win against Indy. That one should be a good one. We'll find out a lot about Indy Sunday in this particular game. It is the Giants and the Broncos. Stirring win by the Giants, obviously. Jackson Dart and Cam Skattebo looks like a formidable combination at the quarterback, running back position for that franchise moving forward. But they're playing probably the most elite defense in the NFL right now, who leads the league in sacks, who's just completely versatile, front end, back end, however you want to name it, scheme-wise. They can play any scheme they want because they have the personnel to do it. Nick Bonito, one of the better and more underrated defensive players in the league, probably a serious challenger for Defensive Player of the Year this year. And they're going to handle the Giants. I think this one rather convincingly also at home. Give me Denver at home. I think this one won't be close. And, of course, the NFC East battle, Washington at Dallas. Washington, something is missing. Okay? I know Jaden Daniels missed a couple games, but something is missing. I don't know what it is, but it's missing. They're not going to have Noah Brown for the next few games. You know, he's on IR. They're going against a Dallas offense who can just put points up anytime they want, even without CeeDee Lamb, because Dak Prescott is that guy. I mean, you can say a lot of things, but he is that guy. And I expect him to do the same thing here. And I know the Dallas' defense can't stop a team filled with 11 statues on offense, but I'm going to take Dallas at home. I think this one's going to be, has the makings of a shootout, but do give me Dallas at home on their home field because I think Dallas' offense does a lot better at home than they do on the road anyways. And the Sunday night tilt is Atlanta at San Francisco. Of course, 49ers looking for an edge rusher to replace Nick Bosa. Linked to Trey Hendrickson, which I'll touch on tomorrow night. And they're going against an Atlanta team who's just cooking the last couple of weeks, especially how they just handled Buffalo on their home field. But after an emotional run on a short turnaround to go cross country to face the San Francisco team, granted they're so all over the place when it comes to injuries, health, and personnel, I'm still leaning towards San Francisco at home, albeit not by much, but they'll find a way to get it done. Mac Jones is playing pretty darn well, all things considered. I know he laid an egg last week at Tampa, but we know Tampa's a different breed. Do give me at San Francisco at home. So that's the Sunday night tilt. Now we go to the Monday night games. And probably the game of the week is taking place in Detroit. We know what happened with Detroit against Kansas City. Everybody's going to make their hoopla about it. Point is, the offense just got stopped, period. I mean, they got stopped. They're playing a Tampa Bay team with a Baker Mayfield who doesn't matter who they put on the roster. He's finding ways to lead the team to victories. I mean, he's doing something right. Ascended to a top 10 quarterback in the NFL this season. As a result, makes those people in northeastern Ohio and Cleveland, with their heads all wound up because they don't know what the hell is going on because they were stupid enough to release him and want him out. So Baker Mayfield, of course, we know lands in Tampa. I don't know who's going to be the receivers, the tight ends, or the running backs on that team because some way, somehow, they're doing it. And how are they doing it? That defense is as good as anything, especially when it comes to stopping the run, or at least slowing them down. When you talk about the two-headed monster Detroit has with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, they're going to probably slow them down, make Jared Goff try to beat them. I think for this week, however, after what happened Sunday night in Kansas City, I think Detroit finds a way to right the ship a bit and get a win here and try to right this wrong. This one has the makings of a shootout also. Because you talk about the two quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield and Jared Goff. They find a way to put points on the board, and I expect the same thing to happen here. Give me Detroit at home, probably by a game-winning field goal. So give me Detroit on that one. And to cap off the Monday night schedule, it is Houston at Seattle. The Seattle defensive front is pretty impressive right now, led by Byron Murphy, the first-round pick out of Texas, to clog up that middle, to solidify that defensive front that what Mike McDaniel likes. We go back to his years as Baltimore's defensive coordinator. And I expect that defense to basically tee off on a Houston offensive line that's just done a not so great job in protecting C.J. Stroud. I expect that to continue. The combination of Sam Darnold to Jackson Smith and Ibija is as good as any quarterback wide receiver duo in the NFL right now. And I expect that to continue on their home field in Seattle. Give me the Seahawks at home. They're cooking right now. And I expect that to continue. That defensive front is going to make life terrible for C.J. Stroud and the Houston Texans. So that covers my Week 7 picks. I will replay the picks later on for those of you watching other video platforms across social media. Now, of course, still the ongoing issue as I revert back to the Detroit-Kansas City game. Now, I guess it was Dan Campbell came out and said it was the referees that told him that made the decision after there was the play that got Jared Goff the touchdown overturned. As I hope a bunch of wild baloney that took place. See, New York has the own replay officials to look at it. If you're still complaining about officials, don't watch the game. I mean, if you think refereeing is that bad, just don't watch it. That's simple. I mean, if you want to spend time watching officiating than the game, you're watching the game for the wrong reasons, and you might as well just take a ballet. I mean, if you're complaining about what took place in that on one particular play that you thought would make much of a difference, you're not following the game for the right reasons. You're not a fan of the game for the right reasons, and your best bet is simply get out, because that's what happened. We talk about what took place with this particular play and that particular game between Detroit and Kansas City. Yes, it is sort of not a good look that what Dan Campbell said, because Dan Campbell was you could probably say is correct, but it's not the end all be all when you talk about the fact that Houston. That's why Detroit lost the game. They lost the game because their offense only generated 17 points, and they came in as the hottest offense in the entire NFL. So, but if you're in this thing to complain about how bad the officiating was when you talk about the Detroit Lions or any NFL game or any sport for that matter, just simply don't watch. And if you still think the referees favor the Kansas City Chiefs as you guys say they do, why don't you guys bet everything you own, your house, your cars, your wives or husbands, your children, your grandparents, your aunts and uncles, your cars, your trucks, your land, your businesses. Bet everything you own on the Kansas City Chiefs. Second is a safe bet. If you legitimately think the NFL referees favor the Kansas City Chiefs, like we've seen a lot over the last few days, again, bet everything you own. Bet your house. Bet your life savings. Bet your checking account. Bet your savings account. Bet your cell phone. Bet your cars. Bet your pets. Bet your pet's dog crap. Bet your if you're a dog owner, bet their dog crap. If you're a cat owner, bet the cat litter. Bet it all on the Chiefs if you think the refs do favor the Chiefs, because you will be a guaranteed winner if you do. Otherwise, you just look like a bona fide moron in this sense. And if you also think the referees are that bad for you, don't watch the game. Take your act elsewhere. There's just things we could talk about with football than just bad refereeing. Something about you guys at the end of the day worrying about the referees, and it's an act of cowardice. And I remind you again, we talk about the Kansas City Chiefs from 2015 on. They were one of the most penalized teams in the NFL. And during the Mahomes era, they're always in the top 10 in terms of most penalties. So you're going to tell me the referees help the Kansas City Chiefs as they're among the top 10 most penalized teams in the NFL? Okay. Tell me where that logic lies. I mean, I'm waiting. I'll be here waiting. You're more than welcome to talk to me if you can find proof that that's the case. You're talking about a team, since they drafted Patrick Mahomes, has been the top 10 in penalties. I mean, and last year, I think they were among the most also. I mean, someone must have out a stat over 1,100 penalties since 2015 to now for that franchise, but yet still people think that they help out the Kansas City Chiefs. As I said, if you legitimately think, and I mean legitimately, deep down legitimately think the referees help the Kansas City Chiefs in games, bet your house, bet your cars, bet your families, bet your pets, bet your dog's dog crap in the yard, bet your cat's kitty litter in the litter box, bet your cell phones, bet the hair you wear, bet the clothes you wear, put it online in a sports bet it all, and you'll wind up a winner. Let's see who has the courage to do that. I'll sit back and wait. If you legitimately think the referees help the Kansas City Chiefs, I gotta see someone with the balls to do this. And you can probably bet other things. Also, you can bet the hats you wear. You can probably bet the rug and carpet in the houses you live in. You can bet the roofs in the house you live in. Bet it all. Just put it on the line. Bet it all, and you'll be a guaranteed winner if you legitimately think the NFL helps the Kansas City Chiefs. Just do it. Just do it. Let's see you guys have some balls to do it. I'll be replaying this across the board. You're all going to love it. That takes care of the NFL segment. There's it tomorrow night. I'll do the Pittsburgh-Cincinnati game from Cincinnati outside Paycor Stadium along the banks. So I'll be touching on that game tomorrow night. That's why my NFL segment is a little brief tonight. So we jump into the world of boxing. And one of the most moronic things that come out of a fighter's mouth that I've ever heard, actually, a fighter, his trainer, took place a few days ago. This was Malik Scott, the trainer of Deontay Wilder. I mean, Malik Scott, whose brother Joel, a multi-time ex-con. We know how that goes in the fight game. Comes up and makes this odd prediction of Deontay Wilder would handle Muhammad Ali without breaking a sweat. I don't know the exact words, but that's how he worded it. The guy needs check for CTE, okay? Let's get out of the way. He's checked for CTE. The guy is more shaved on his head than I am. And I think he needs to put a toupee on his head to hide the deteriorating brain cells he has inside it. I mean, you know, remember what happened when he fought Tyson Fury 3 times? I mean, the first fight was a boxing lesson. The second fight was a beatdown. The third fight was basically Fury combining the first and the second fights from the fifth round on and doing the same thing again. And you're trying to tell me this guy would take down a prime Muhammad Ali who confronted Sonny Liston, Joe Frazier, and George Foreman, three of the scariest individuals of the 60s and 70s, and basically wiped the ring with Liston and Frazier. We know that. And managed to go life and death with Frazier, and even the third fight, at times fighting Frazier's fight and beating him. You think Deontay Wilder's going to beat that guy? I said all along, it's bad enough I had to deal with Mike Tyson fans who are the biggest bunch of psycho-crazed morons in the boxing community. I didn't realize Deontay Wilder fans and Malik Scott are not far behind it. And this pretty much simplifies it. What are you basing the criteria on? The fact he knocked out some character named Spitzer, the one-round knockout over a character called Dominic Brazil, the same one Anthony Joshua wiped the ring with a year before. So what is the criteria for this? That's why I don't like to talk about fantasy matchups. I think the ideologies they have are ignorant and stupid. And I say intentionally ignorant and stupid. And we have another case of it here. I mean, yes, Deontay Wilder is a 6'7" figure, and Ali probably hasn't seen a 6'7" figure. in his career. He probably has messed with taller fighters, but the style of Deontay Wilder would play right into any of those guys' hands during that era. And when you're a free swinger the way he is, and he's a free swinger, we know that, and you have no other alternative when you can't hit the free swing, you're banging a strikeout, and that's what happened when Deontay Wilder fought Tyson Fury 3 times, and that's why he'll strike out against anyone in any era. Plain and simple. I mean, the reason why he was gift wrapped a fake heavyweight championship was simply because the heavyweight division was just in a dry spell after, the Klitschko era ended, and everything just went all over the place with the governing bodies again. So someone needs to tell Malik Scott to go check for CTE immediately. Somebody needs to go to Malik Scott to basically, after that, live in a mental, asylum for about the next 5 years. Somebody needs to go tell Malik Scott to avoid any kind of contact with boxers or any kind of interviews regarding boxing, because it'll be grateful for his mental health. And someone needs to go tell Malik Scott that he needs to watch footage of Muhammad Ali's past and see if he legitimately thinks that Deontay Wilder could beat that guy. I mean, that's the only thing I can come up with for Malik Scott. Now, I'm trying to help him out. And maybe somebody could help him out with that regard too. Please do it, because he needs it. That's just next level moronism at its finest. Now we're going to go back to one of the more wilder scenes. This took place over a century ago, as you were talking about 116 years ago. This was Stanley Ketchel and Jack Johnson in a fight at Colma, California. This was originally on the surface supposed to be some kind of a exhibition, at least perception-wise. At least that's how it was signed, on a 20-round clash. But when you as I'm reading this, as I'm talking to you, they were fighting as if, even though, despite it was the perception of an exhibition, they were fighting as if they were trying to win, which the competitive blood of a fighter or athlete, whether it's exhibition or not, does the competitive juices take over. I get it. Understood. We talk about what took place with this. They agreed to this for about and the first 11 rounds was fought as it. And we talk about what took place in that 12th round of this fight. After just having the whole thing just be more of an exhibition clash versus an actual fight, then things start to get a little crazy here. Because we talk about Stanley Ketchel, the Michigan assassin, against Jack Johnson, the Galveston Giant. I mean, talk about their backgrounds. You had a feeling this was going to happen, because these two guys were always looking to prove something, especially Jack Johnson, who was trying to cross barriers at that time. And we know the story of Jack Johnson. That's been chronicled a million times. Everybody knows it. Some of it crossed sensitive barriers, which I won't do. But we talk about Stanley Ketchel and Jack Johnson and the chips they had on their shoulders. Despite this being an exhibition, you had a feeling this was going to happen. And we talk about what took place in the 12th round of this fight. Out of nowhere, the overhand Stanley Ketchel decided to be aggressive out of nowhere. And then Jack Johnson, they got to a little tackled each other down. And after this fight, after he put Johnson down, Johnson got up, got into a rage, and knocked hit Stanley Ketchel, my bad. He hit Stanley Ketchel so hard, Ketchel lost his teeth. I mean, that tells you how brutal Jack Johnson was. And Jack Johnson was not the guy you wanted to tick off back in those days. And Stanley Ketchel found out the hard way. But this was a David versus Goliath promotion, because Stanley Ketchel was a middleweight and Johnson was a heavyweight. And remember, this is not what we have today with the many weight divisions. This is a different era of weight classes, and this was pegged as an exhibition, which is what it was. But when the 12th round came around, the competitive juices took over, and Jack Johnson said, "You wanted to get competitive with me? Fine. The right cross, you lost your teeth," and down went Ketchel, down and out for the count. And that was basically it. And it basically showed after the fight, when Jack Johnson hit him with the right hand and knocked Stanley Ketchel's teeth out, there was an image of Johnson with a glove with Stanley Ketchel's teeth inside it. The image of a fighter's teeth inside a glove. That tells you how brutal Jack Johnson was in the 1900s. This was pegged as an exhibition, but because all of a sudden Ketchel wanted to have his competitive juice flowing. He did it to the wrong guy in Jack Johnson, who always had a chip on his shoulder. And because of it, Jack Johnson landed that right cross that flattened Ketchel, cost Ketchel some of his teeth, and wound up the teeth wound up in the glove of Jack Johnson. And that's how Jack Johnson was declared a winner on a 12th round knockout. Just some odd, weird circumstances for an exhibition that all of a sudden just turned competitive. And Jack Johnson just basically said, the heck with it. If you want to be competitive, I'll be competitive. The right hand's going to hit you. You're going to get knocked out. And as you're getting knocked out, I'm going to take some teeth with me. That's what he did to Stanley Ketchel. Now, the misfortune of all of this, and there's a giant misfortune, and this is where the mobs back then were running wild. The next day, Stanley Ketchel was shot. And that's sad. A year later, a year and a day later, I apologize. I do apologize for this. It was a day and a year later after this fight, Stanley Ketchel was shot. That was it. Unbelievable. Due to his time, fortunately, with his death, we only have Jack Johnson's version of this fight, never Stanley Ketchel's, because Ketchel never responded to this. And it's unfortunate, the whole circumstance, because we talk about Stanley Ketchel, one of the underrated fighters of that era. I mean, he was a terrific, terrific fighter. Just this whole shebang just went down the drain and immediately. And he did it against the wrong guy. I mean, we know the story of Jack Johnson. And Jack Johnson said, you want to be competitive? Okay, I'll just hit you with the right hand and take some of your teeth with me, what you sprout onto the canvas. And that's what happened. Because Stanley Ketchel was a darn good fighter, just decided to do this against the wrong guy. And it was only an exhibition. Think about it. In an exhibition, competitive juices took over, somebody lost his teeth, and was eventually shot a year later. All over an exhibition. And this is 1909. Let me remind you, this is a whole different shebang. And there was one guy back then you never wanted to mess with. It was Jack Johnson. And Stanley Ketchel found out the hard way. Just a wild and crazy circumstance. And now we fast forward to what took place. You go more modern, and another odd set of circumstances. This took place 36 years ago in Charlotte, North Carolina. This was Eusebio Pedroza escaping with a split decision draw over a fighter named Bernard Taylor. There's boxing, and then there's Bernard Taylor. I mean, I guess Taylor was going to try and survive the early rounds because we know how vicious of a fighter Eusebio Pedroza was and can be. But when you think about, when I watched this, the story of this fight, this was a case of a fighter doing two fights. The first fight was Taylor was doing just enough to keep Pedroza at bay, but in the second half, it was a case of Pedroza taking over. And we know when Pedroza takes over, he's as good as anyone in the history of that division. But there's a lot of weirdness to this because that line of boxing and running, when we talk about some of these fights, we know, because we know the fight fans and the boxing intelligentsia sometimes can distinguish the two between boxing and running. And that's what we had to hear with Bernard Taylor. He had a standout amateur career, over 500 fights and only 12 losses. You would think he'd be better than that. But as the fight was going on, the effective aggression of Pedroza took over and was able to salvage a draw. In a fight that had the decision all over the freaking place, one judge had it a draw, one for Pedroza and one for Taylor, in the backyard of Bernard Taylor, which was outside Charlotte, North Carolina. But we need to think of these two fighters. One was a case he should have been more than what he was in Bernard Taylor, because he did manage to get a couple decent wins. Actually held his own with Barry McGuigan before McGuigan took his head off. But when you think about Eusebio Pedroza, a long-tenured featherweight champion, got a lot of good wins. Because of his longevity, he became an all-time great featherweight. But the one thing that still maybe haunted him was his unableness to actually secure the fight that he should have done when he should have fought Salvador Sanchez to clean out the featherweight division, because that was a big fight that was talked about in the back end of the 70s and the early part of the 80s, especially after how Sanchez just wiped out Wilfredo Gomez. The opportunity was there, but Pedroza didn't go get it. Now, granted, that the unfortunate tragedy of Salvador Sanchez sort of put the caboose to the whole thing. But we talk about the angle of Eusebio Pedroza and a potential matchup with Salvador Sanchez. Maybe he should have pursued it more and pursued it harder and went out there and gone and get it, because it was there. It was talked about. It would have been the ideal styles clash. Granted, Pedroza towed the line on many things, and there's a lot of accusations about how he towed the line, especially from the Bernard Taylor camp, when Bernard Taylor people put together an edited crop VHS tape of the things he did in that particular fight. But it was a fight that should have been made, being Eusebio Pedroza and Salvador Sanchez. Granted, the unfortunate tragedy of Sanchez didn't help matters. The opportunity was there for Pedroza to get it, but he never capitalized on it. And though he did have the solid reign of 19 successful title defenses of the featherweight belt, never had really a staple win. Because we talk about his resume, a lot of good fighters. I mean, he did beat the great Ruben Oliveras, but you could probably say Oliveras is on his downturn a little bit. That's with the title from Alfonso Zamora, solid fighter. Nothing great about that. Of course, I mentioned a few weeks ago, he beat Rocky Lockridge in more like a B plus type fighter, not the A type fighter that he should have had. Also beat Juan Laporte in New Jersey. Of course, I said the draw with Taylor. Also, eventually got a rematch win over Lockridge, but that was basically it. And when he went to London to fight to fight Barry McGuinn and lose his championship, that was it. Eusebio Pedroza might be the perfect case of a great fighter due to longevity, and that's what he was. No one's going to mistake the resume for being the greatest thing ever, but because he successfully defended his title for as long as he did against many different fighters in many different parts of the globe, which he did, that alone makes him one of the great featherweights of all time. No one's going to mistake him for being in that upper category. We talk about Pep or Sadler or Henry Armstrong or even Sanchez, but he did have a long reign. He had the style that made you want to watch, and that alone puts him among the all-time greats. But maybe a case of a fighter as his career was going on, something was missing. Maybe what was missing was he should have pursued the fight with Salvador Sanchez when he had the chance, because opportunities were there. He never capitalized on it. It was there. Would he have beaten Sanchez? Up for debate. I probably would say no, because Sanchez, we know, was a different breed compared to Eusebio Pedroza. But that fight should have been made, and that fight, probably falls in the category of why. I know it was talked about before the Sanchez tragedy, because Sanchez had a rematch against Juan Laporte he had to go through, which he would have just demolished Juan Laporte. But when you talk about the career of Eusebio Pedroza, maybe a case of a fighter that was, great as he was, and he was great when you make 19 successful title defenses over a 7-year reign, you did something right. But not having that landmark moment, that a moment where you can point to say, hey, that guy was great, was probably what's missing from his resume. Grant, not to the fault of his, because that division sort of hit a bit of a transitional phase before we had guys like Rafael Gomez, among many others that eventually came around. But Eusebio Pedroza was a case of a fighter, greatest due to longevity, and he deserves a lot of credit for it. 7 years and 19 successful title defenses. Now we talk about Bernard Taylor. And another case of a fighter who was a terrific amateur, maybe a case of a fighter who was an amateur a little too long, because what happens when you're an amateur and you go to the pros, you pick up too many amateurish habits, and sometimes the pros will exploit it. Maybe you can see what happened on this draw with Eusebio Pedroza is what happened. Because we talk about the actual career of Bernard Taylor, his amateur career, very established, multiple times as the National Golden Gloves champion in the bantamweight and featherweight divisions from 76 to 78. And we talk about turning pro at 18. Maybe you could say this fight with Pedroza was a little too soon because it was only 18 fights. He managed to fight a couple more times for world titles after this, held his own against Barry McGuinn before he got his head knocked off. And eventually in 93, when he was as a shell of himself, lost to John Molina in a stoppage for one of the super lightweight championships. He did manage to win a couple titles at the regional level at the North American and United States championships as a pro. But that was pretty much it. Maybe a case of a fighter that just stuck around in the amateurs a little too long. But when you think about the success he had, four-time national Golden Gloves champion. That's probably what Bernard Taylor will be best remembered for. I mean, he was a terrific amateur fighter. Maybe a case of a fighter that was too much amateur, because when you stay in the amateurs as long as that guy does, and you try moving over to the pros after that long of an amateur career, you're gonna, I don't want to say you're gonna struggle, but you're gonna find hard footing because you're so adapted to the amateur style, the way Bernard Taylor was. I can point to a few other examples. Maybe most modern, Jorge Luis Gonzalez as a heavyweight, where he's an amateur too long, and he was too fundamental when it comes to the amateurs. And we try to translate it over to the pros because the pros can figure it out faster. Your downfall is going to be quicker than it is. And that's what happened with Bernard Taylor. Still a solid pro, but not the distinguished career he had when he was an amateur. But 43 years ago in Charlotte, North Carolina, a wild draw under bizarre circumstances, and now include bizarre accusations between the two camps and the two fighters, because that's what Eusebio Pedroza and Bernard Taylor was. And Eusebio Pedroza basically fought guys who were just tailor-made for him for the rest of his career until he went to London and lost the decision to the well-beloved Barry McGuigan. But Pedroza was a Hall of Fame, all-time great, largely due to longevity. Doesn't have a statement win, but the longevity more than makes up for it, and he's certainly an all-time great featherweight. And Bernard Taylor, probably more remembered for an established amateur career, but maybe a case of a guy, maybe you say he stays an amateur a bit too long because the amateur style didn't translate to the pros. Now everybody's going to talk about this running versus boxing because everybody always has this debate. You know the perfect fight of how a runner is? YouTube the 1991 fight between Lonnie Smith and Julio Cesar Chavez, because Lonnie Smith just came out and just ran the entire fight as if he was trying to win the Boston Marathon in reverse because he knew Chavez was going to hunt him down. And I'll let you guys make your determinations about that fight as to what running is, because that was running. They're boxers, and there's definitely runners. And then there was Lonnie Smith against Julio Cesar Chavez, who decided to just run the whole night and say, I went 12 rounds with Julio Cesar Chavez just to not get knocked out. It's all own categories. Interesting. And on that note, that'll wrap up this short edition of Sir Hunt on X. I will be live tomorrow night from the banks of Ohio in Cincinnati, Ohio, for their live preview of the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cincinnati Bengals, which should be a very good AFC North clash. I will break it down further as best I can, give you my official prediction. And as always, if you miss any of this show or any of the other shows, you can always listen to them on your Apple Podcasts and iHeartRadio apps, and the video version on the Spotify radio app, among all the social media platforms, YouTube, X, and even Rumble and Kick. And as always, make self-care your number one priority in all walks of life. If you take care of yourself first, focus on you and only you first, all the good things will come your way. If you don't take care of yourself first, nothing else matters. Focus on you and take care of you first. And on that note, have a good rest of the night. Take care of yourselves. God bless. I will see you live tomorrow from the banks of Ohio River as we get ready for the Steelers and the Bengals.